6:33, good morning. Let's have a look at the front pages of the newspapers this morning. The Mail says voters are backing Rwanda and net zero plans. The poll shows Rishi Sunak has a path to election victory, apparently.
The Daily Mirror has reported on the tragic death of a 15-year-old girl. She was killed in a school bus crash on the M53 in Merseyside yesterday morning. That's the Times that we're looking at, actually, there. It
is. The Times says the Chancellor has pledged to end the vicious circle of ever-rising taxes.
And the front page of the there it is. Features Rishi Sunak's plan to block councils from issuing zealous fines and prevent blanket use of 20-mile-an-hour zones.
Let's talk through some of the headlines today, then, with journalist and author Ella Whelan and writer and commentator Candice Holdsworth, our headline makers this morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Let's start with Ella, actually, it's you, isn't it, and the Mail and the election plans for Rishi.
Yes.
They're going to have to be pretty good if he's going to beat the polls.
Well, this is interesting because the Mail's making a big splash with their own poll, looking at various questions from small boats to taxes to HS2 and all the rest of the stuff that's happening. It's a small poll. It's only 1,000 people taking a snapshot between the 28th and 29th of September. And the Mail is running with the fact that there are a few no-brainers in here. So, 60% of people support the idea of the Illegal Migration Act. That won't come as a surprise to many people. They want him to, 42% want to get the northern leg of HS2 done. Again, not really particularly controversial. Most people want to see a plan that is begun by the government finished and implemented. But there is some stuff in here that Rishi Sunak won't like. So, for example, 48%, as opposed to 31%, think that he's not doing well as the leader of the Conservative Party. In fact, 39%, as opposed to 31%, think that Keir Starmer would make a better Prime Minister. So it's quite an interesting snapshot of how things are still very complicated for this government, and that actually going into party conference time, nothing is certain. Things are still, despite a few kind of announcements around today, stuff to do with cars, people still want to see some kind of substantial movement on Sunak's 5 pledges. And he certainly isn't going to just be able to come in, announce a few nice, things around net zero and waltz into another round of government. It's going to be much more complicated for him.
Yeah, I got the same impression. It was quite a mixed picture. I mean, his position on green policies seems to be very popular, but he's interestingly not that trusted on the NHS. Voters seem to think Keir Starmer is more capable, or the people who responded to this poll, should I say, think Keir Starmer is more capable of managing what's gone wrong. And they don't think he can solve the small boats crisis as well. They don't think Rishi Sunak will be able to do that. So in terms of his 5 pledges, it's a really, really mixed picture. And he's actually got quite a tricky path to election victory. I mean, there's no way that it's a should, even though they've seen this bump in the polls since he's taken the stance he has on net zero. So maybe this is sort of showing to them, it's like the evidence is showing them where they need to focus and exactly how they need to differentiate themselves from Labour.
How bumpy a ride is it going to be at conference, do we think?
Well, I mean, splits within his own party are severe. I mean, he has to kind of do he's fighting on 2 fronts. On the one hand, trying to solve things like, there's a big row around the European Convention of Human Rights. There's, big rows around things around HS2, Brexit rows remain. But there's people like Liz Truss who aren't going to give him too much of an easy ride at conference. His own party is certainly not sort of ready to fight an election in a unified way. And then there's also the fact that...
Plus, you've got a whole load of people after his job, and people like Penny Mordaunt desperate for number 10 and... Well,
exactly. It's not like... I mean, Penny Mordaunt being just one of them, there isn't this unification. But also, in terms of appealing to the electorate, the Conservatives have this problem. Labour, sort of in a similar way, but the Conservatives have this problem where, for example, they might make announcements on inheritance tax, which they think will be a winner for their voters. And sort of traditionally, you think, well, yes, Tory voters don't like, changes to inheritance tax. But remember that in 2019, the sweep of Conservative voters was much wider. It went into working class communities and the Red Wall and all of that. So it's not as simple as just saying, you know, let's be NIMBY and let's protect inheritance tax and we'll win. There's a much more complicated voter base there for them.
Although they are trying to reach out to drivers, and I suppose that's a very big base. Mark Harper, who we're going to speak to, I think, quite soon, done a huge piece there in the Express, saying we are now the party of the driver. We're going to protect drivers' rights in all sorts of different ways. We're not going to have blanket 20-mile-an-hour zones and things like that.
Well, can't stop it in London, can he? You can't stop it.
You can't go
low-traffic neighbourhoods and all that.
You can't go faster than 20 anywhere in London anyway, can you? Really?
No,
but it's just interesting that they are trying to reach out to at least that's a very wide base, voter base.
Yes. I mean, the announcement, one of the major announcements that we're going to have a parking app that applies to the whole rest of the country. Fine, that's lovely. I hate the fact that I've got 7 on my phone. Not really the issue. The issue is LTNs. The issue is, you know, speed limits and things like that. So, again, it's just, get it right.
Well, and as you said before, Candice, the 5 big pledges which aren't being met, in the Telegraph this morning, the Home Secretary refusing to talk with Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, about immigration, which seems... He may not say anything. It may not be a conversation which produces anything, but it doesn't look good to say, no, we're not talking to you.
I know. And so this article, actually, in the Telegraph was very interesting about Suella Braverman, because I think the people who'd briefed the article were quite critical of her. And apparently Welby wanting to have a meeting with her about everything she's been saying and her pushing him back, they were very surprised by it. They actually thought she would take the meeting. But there are many in the Conservative Party who aren't happy with the way she's been talking about this and the way she's been talking about the ECHR as well. They think that she's taking too hardline a stance and they don't want her to do that. And also what she's been saying about multiculturalism, Rishi Sunak came out and said the exact opposite. So there's divides there, and I do wonder how much of this has to do with a possible leadership election at some point if they don't win the next election.
Do you think anyone, though, really cares whether or not she meets Justin Welby? I mean, really, do we? We might have 30, 40 years ago, we might have thought that an archbishop has a right to express his opinions, and particularly to her. But do we actually think that anymore?
It's a good question, because you would think that Anglican churchgoers would be the Conservative Party's natural constituency. But I think Justin Welby, I don't know how in sync he is with Conservative voters on this issue.
No, he probably isn't.
No, he probably isn't.
However, see, that would be the whole point for me. You know, he doesn't agree with a lot of what is going on. However, that doesn't mean you should listen to opposing voices.
Yeah, I mean...
GBNEWS is all about. You listen to opposing voices, even if you come out and say, thanks for your time, but I don't, you know, we're not going to implement anything you've suggested.
Yeah, she could. I mean, the whole point is that obviously, if Braverman did go into a meeting with him, she couldn't stay quiet while he did his spiel, which he would do, which would be equivalent to what he's done before, which is you're basically evil if you want to talk about anything in relation to migration. I find myself in a strange position of being, you know, completely opposed in terms of how liberal we are on migration to Suella Braverman's position, but wanting to back her on all these sort of, the idea of an elected politician, even with the influence that the church has in this country and the history of it, having to basically bow and scrape to, and Justin Welby has positioned himself as sort of not just the moral voice of the church, but someone who can sort of throw his weight around on issues, and has previously, I know that sounds strange saying because he's the Archbishop, but the way he's waded into political rows of late has, I think, left a bad taste in people's mouth, even churchgoers, because it's just too much and it's just too far. And so, in relation to debates about the ECHR, which are fundamentally about democracy and how governments can make and enact laws, I think probably a lot of people will say, well, good that she hasn't met him, whether or not that's the right tack or not.
I don't know. I don't think Archbishop and someone who is the leader of the Church of England should necessarily keep their mouth shut. I'm not saying we have to agree with what they're saying, but they have a moral duty to voice concerns.
Yeah, but he doesn't have a right to meet the Home Secretary, does he?
No, but also, what Suella Braverman said on multiculturalism, whatever you think about it, Angela Merkel said it previously, David Cameron said it previously. It's actually old hat, her argument.
Yeah.
Did Welby or any other archbishop come out and have such moral outrage or any when they said it back then? No. There's something else going on in relation to Suella Braverman, which, again, not a fan of her, but I think you don't have to be a fan of her to realise that there is some kind of faux kind of moral crusade going on here, which is about stopping immigration policy.
I just wonder if Welby's picked up as well amongst some Conservatives their dissatisfaction with Suella Braverman. They don't like her. There are many within the Conservative Party who just don't like her and don't like the way she talks about it. I think she is slightly weak in that regard.
I don't think he would be playing politics in that sense. He's just wanting to voice concerns. And I don't know whether he has a right or not. I don't know. But then don't forget the king is the sort of head of the church and Justin Welby is the leader. It is the king's government. I don't know whether there is some link there to say they should speak to him or listen to him if he wants to say something.
I personally think it's outrageous that he thinks he's got the right.
Do you?
Yeah, it's a religious leader. That's what he is now. And we live in the 21st century.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I disagree with you. But then I'm a churchgoer. Yeah. So then maybe
I have been, but not for that reason. I don't see that he has a right to meddle in politics.
I think I don't meddle. I think it's about having your say. I think it's about having your say. I'm not saying she should listen. She should agree with him or kowtow to him.
I think maybe the difference is that Welby knows. I'm climbing inside his head now, which is probably unfair, but I think that Welby knows that whatever he said would make all of the front pages, would have so much backing, even from people who weren't churchgoers, and it would add weight to this sort of argument that's been mounted against Braverman, which is basically, and GBNEWS will know about this because you've, have dealt in similar debates, talk about immigration, even, to any extent, shut up, you're a racist. And there is that tone to it, which I think will make a lot of people think, talking to Welby, will that really benefit the debate?
We are horrible to our Home Secretaries, aren't we?
Oh, well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a horrible job.
They do.
Sometimes they're quite bad at it.
So many women have done it as well.
I don't necessarily want... I mean, sometimes they tend to be quite bad at it. The role of Home Secretary hasn't been a successful one over the last... For quite a long time. So it's not to let them off the hook, but there is something else that goes on in relation to the way in which, we've seen the way in which Suella Braverman's been discussed in relation to this multiculturalism argument, basically saying, how dare she, as a brown woman, have a view on this that's not in line with, identity politics? That's outrageous, Play the politics, not the person.
Out of interest, who was our last male Home Secretary?
No.
Long time ago.
It's a long time ago. But David Davis was Home Secretary, wasn't he?
Gosh,
I can't
was he?
I don't think so.
He might have been. Anyway, we'll find out. We shall have a
Let us
Google.
know.